This is the story about Curtis Warren. How this young lad from Toxteth went on to become the biggest drug lord in Europe, from the beginning to the end. It was a cold November night in 2007 when Colin Smith, a father, walked into the jaws of death. Outside a gym in South Liverpool, just after 8 p.m, he received a call. Or maybe it was a text. He stepped out, unknowingly, into an ambush. Moments later, he was hit twice in the stomach with a pump-action shotgun. The shots echoed like thunder through the side street behind the Mill House pub. By the time police arrived, the shooter was already a ghost, rumored to be halfway to a new identity on a flight out of John Lennon Airport. A professional job, a warning maybe. But from who? Was it a Colombian cartel, settling scores over a vanished cocaine shipment? Or was it a setup, an execution wrapped in betrayal? This wasn't just another gangland hit. This was a message. And the man whose name kept surfacing in hushed tones, Curtis Warren. But we'll get to him. Stay with us. Curtis Francis Warren. Known on the streets and in the headlines as Cocky. Once Interpol's Target 1, he was Britain's most wanted. A man whose empire stretched across continents. On paper, a gangster. In reality, a one-man multinational. His name even appeared on the Sunday Times rich list. Few criminals ever do. Born 31st May 1963, he was the second son of Curtis Alicius Warren, a South American seaman in the Norwegian Merchant Navy, and Antonia Chantra, daughter of a shipyard boiler worker. The family lived in Toxteth, Liverpool, a place forged by fire, poverty, and unspoken codes of survival. Toxteth wasn't just rough, it was legend. This is where it all began. Toxteth, tougher than concrete, more volatile than gasoline. A crucible where boys turned into soldiers of the street. For Curtis, it was a classroom. The curriculum, power, silence, hustle. You didn't need textbooks, just nerve and eyes wide open. There were streets the police feared. Granby Street was one of them. It wasn't just a road, it was a fortress. Terraced streets branched off it like ribs from a spine. Between them, shops, barbers, butchers, fruit stalls, fronts for an open-air narcotics market. You could walk in and buy drugs like fruit. Dealers on every corner like sentries. It looked like a scene from a gritty American film, but it was real. And right here in Liverpool. At the time, nowhere else in England had zones the police outright avoided. Granby Street became a myth, a warning. And to the street-born entrepreneurs of Toxteth, it became something else. A kingdom. A place where you could feel untouchable. Then came the fire.
Merseyside's chief constable said it was a planned attack. We were set up, he said. The worst of the rioting came just after dawn, when police faced a hail of stones, bottles, iron bars and petrol bombs. The missiles were hurled from behind barricades of upturned and burning cars. It began in Upper Parliament Street, one of the main roads out of the city centre, and ammunition was all around in derelict sites and empty houses. At daylight, the police began a series of charges to break up the gangs massed in front of them, but as the rioters fell back, they set fire to more buildings, and sporadic looting, which had been going on all night, now spread. Shop after shop was plundered and goods scattered around as the youths fled. And still the bricks, stones and lumps of iron were thrown, worst of all the petrol bombs. And against all this, riot shields and visors were not enough. At least 70 policemen were injured and 12 are still in hospital tonight.
July 1981. The Toxteth riots ignited decades of tension between the black community and police. Brick by brick, Molotov by Molotov, the streets declared war. Curtis Warren was 18, and while there's no official record of his hand in the chaos, you can almost picture him, stone in hand, eyes burning. The heart of the violence, the Granby Triangle, bounded by Upper Parliament Street, Lodge Lane, Sefton Park Road, Princes Road, and Toxteth Road. This was ground zero. On the edges stood faded 19th century mansions. Inside, dense terraces packed with families and fury. It was here that Curtis saw a city break and learned that even institutions could bleed. He came from smoke, from stone, from silence. And soon, the world would know his name.
If you like this documentary, please give us a like. Also consider smashing that subscribe. And you can hit the notification bell and you will be informed when our next video is published. Okay, let's get back into the documentary.
On the 21st of March 1995, David Ungi was driving through the quiet Liverpool streets, headlights washing over rain-soaked tarmac. It was late, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. But something was wrong. A car had slipped in behind him. Too close, too steady. Inside that shadowy vehicle were masked men, faces hidden, intentions clear. Ungi's heart pounded, not out of fear but instinct. He pushed the accelerator. The streets blurred. A chase through familiar roads now turned into a gauntlet. It wasn't luck that saved him. It was experience, reflex, a lifetime of knowing when to run and when to fight. He escaped, and for a brief moment, there was relief, a sigh. He was alive. He had slipped death's grip. But survival in that world is never permanent. It only buys you time. The roots of the conflict were already coiled tight. The pressure had been building for weeks across Toxteth and Dingle. Neighbourhoods carved by tension, where lines were drawn in blood and loyalty. At the centre stood two names, Johnny Phillips and David Ungi. Johnny Phillips, a powerful presence in Toxteth and a close friend of Curtis Warren, had taken an interest in a local pub, Cheers, on Egberth Road. His mother-in-law wanted to buy it, and Johnny, being who he was, intended to make that happen. But Cheers wasn't just any pub. It was David Ungi's ground, a place he and his people from Dingle frequented. It was more than a local. It was home turf. And when Johnny made it clear they were no longer welcome there, lines were crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. What followed wasn't just a disagreement. It was pride, history, power. They met on a side street, both men surrounded by their factions. To keep the peace, so the story goes, armed men were present only to ensure fairness. This wasn't supposed to be murder. It was meant to be a straightener, a fight, one-on-one, no weapons. Johnny Phillips stood tall, strong, fierce. But David Ungi was a boxer, a former Golden Gloves champion. Faster, sharper. They squared up, trading blows, fists flying like echoes of something ancient. The fight was brutal. Ungi's fists found their mark again and again. Phillips, bloodied and bruised, refused to stay down. He claimed foul play afterward, accused Ungi of using knuckle dusters. Whether true or not, the damage had been done. Physically, publicly, politically. Word spread, pride wounded deeper than fists ever could. And from that wound, something darker poured out. The streets cracked open. Violence erupted. Sides were taken. The fight on B Street wasn't the end. It was the spark. Soon, Liverpool would feel the weight of a gang war no one had truly seen coming. Curtis Warren, watching from the shadows, knew this wasn't just about a pub or pride. It was personal. His friend had been beaten. His name indirectly challenged. David Ungi wasn't just a rival now. He was a problem. Then one night it caught up with David Ungi. He didn't see it coming. Maybe he did. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he thought it was over. Maybe he thought surviving the first time meant something. He was shot dead on the street. No warnings. No second chances. This time, there was no escape. This time, death didn't miss. And just like that, the man who once stood tall bled out on the concrete of a city that had built him, broken him, and finally swallowed him whole. After David Ungi's death, Curtis Warren fled to Amsterdam, gripped by the shadow of retaliation. After the murder of David Ungi, everything changed in the underworld of Liverpool. Once, disputes were settled by good old straighteners. Bare-knuckle fights, a tradition deeply rooted in the city's crime culture. But that code died with Ungi. In its place came drive-by shootings and revenge hits, a cycle of violence that plunged local gangs into a brutal turf war, fed by betrayal, drug patches, and even deep-rooted racial tensions. The streets were already simmering. The Toxteth riots were still fresh in people's minds, the city divided along invisible lines. Ungi was white, the man accused, a person of colour. One from Dingle, one from Toxteth, a powder keg. The situation was never going to hold. While Liverpool spiralled into chaos, Curtis Warren was building an empire from afar. Operating from the Netherlands, his network was growing rapidly, his ambitions rising just as fast. Curtis wasn't just in the game, he was playing to win it. And to do that, like any savvy businessman, he needed the best product at the lowest price. There was only one place in the world that could offer that: South America. Warren and his associate, Brian Charrington, boarded a flight under British passports. Their destination, Venezuela. There, they met with the feared Cali cartel and struck a deal that would change everything. The plan was clever. Cocaine smuggled inside steel boxes, which were then sealed within lead ingots. Too heavy to lift, too dense to scan. It was smuggling genius. The deal was sealed. Curtis returned home, no doubt already orchestrating the logistics for the shipment. A month later, it landed in the UK. Everything had gone off without a hitch. The operation was silent, clean. The perfect crime. The drugs were hidden so well that even if officials had tried to inspect the lead, their drills wouldn't have reached deep enough. Curtis had outthought everyone, but one shipment wasn't enough. By 1995, Curtis Warren was living like a ghost king, wealthy beyond imagination. A villa in Sassenheim, casinos in Spain, discos in Turkey, a vineyard in Bulgaria, land in the Gambia, millions stashed across Swiss bank accounts. He had it all, and still, it wasn't enough. Retirement was an option, but not for a man like him. He kept going. The second shipment was already in motion, following the same blueprint. But this time, customs had caught a whisper. Acting on a tip-off, they intercepted the cargo, cut open a lead ingot, and found nothing. They let it through. Later, the Dutch police revealed the truth. The drugs were hidden in the steel boxes, not the lead. But by the time customs realized their mistake, Warren, Charrington, and the drugs had vanished. Still, another load, larger than the last, was already on its way from South America. When it landed in early 1992, authorities were ready. Curtis Warren, Brian Charrington, and 26 others were arrested in a sweeping operation led by HM Customs and Excise. It looked like the end, but the court case would reveal a twist no one expected. Charrington was a police informant, an asset for the Northeast Regional Crime Squad. Customs pushed for prosecution. The police pushed back. Tensions erupted. Curtis, meanwhile, sat silently, knowing more than anyone expected. It was even alleged in court that he knew the exact length of the longest customs drill bit and how deep they could search inside the ingots. Eventually, Conservative MP Tim Devlin intervened. A secret meeting was arranged. On January 28, 1993, Customs was ordered to drop the case. Every charge was dismissed. Curtis Warren walked free. As he passed the customs agents, it's said he turned and smiled. "I'm off to spend my £87 million from the first shipment, and you can't touch me." Not long after, officers noticed something odd. Harry Knaggs, one of the police handlers, was seen driving a sleek £70,000 BMW, previously registered to Brian Charrington.
If you like this documentary, please give us a like. Also consider smashing that subscribe. And you can hit the notification bell and you will be informed when our next video is published. Okay, let's get back into the documentary.
Then one night, the door crashed open under the cover of darkness. In a coordinated raid that shattered the silence of rural Sassenheim, Curtis Warren and his crew were arrested at gunpoint by Dutch police, backed by UK officers and the elite Essoker unit. Months of surveillance had led them to the isolated farmhouse where a fortress of crime lay hidden in plain sight. Inside, authorities uncovered an arsenal that read like a battlefield inventory: 3 guns, hand grenades, ammunition, and crates packed with 960 CS gas canisters. But it was the drugs that defined the scale of the operation. 400 kilograms of cocaine, 1,500 kilograms of cannabis resin, 60 kilograms of heroin, 50 kilograms of ecstasy, and 400,000 Dutch guilders in cash. Some of the guests' bedrooms even concealed weapons. Warren, 34 at the time, was charged and later found guilty of masterminding a £100 million narcotics empire designed to flood Britain with cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and hashish. His 2 top lieutenants, Stephen Mee, 38, from Liverpool, and Stephen Whitehead, 34, from Oldham, were each sentenced to 7 years, while 3 others, Ray Nolan, 28, William Fitzgerald, 55, and William Riley, 47, received 3-year terms. Yet in The Hague's Central Criminal Court, the presiding judge controversially ruled that Warren was not among the heaviest players in the trade, trimming the prosecution's requested 16-year sentence down to 12. Behind bars in a high-security Dutch prison, Warren's infamy remained intact, but power is never unchallenged. Inside those concrete walls, he clashed with a feared Turkish inmate. The confrontation was explosive, ending in the Turk's death. While some said it was self-defense, others claimed Warren sent a brutal message. Charged with manslaughter, he ultimately walked free as the case was dropped. But freedom would not last. After serving his Dutch sentence, Warren was handed straight over to Jersey authorities. They had built a meticulous case, one constructed through hidden microphones, intercepted calls, and encrypted codes. Though Warren never physically handled drugs or money, his voice linked him directly to a plot to smuggle £1 million worth of cannabis onto the island. Convicted in 2009, he was sentenced to 13 years. Yet even after that term, the battle wasn't over. Prosecutors went after his wealth, millions suspected to be hidden offshore or buried deep. When Warren refused to comply with court orders demanding financial disclosure, he was slapped with another 10-year sentence for contempt. Released in late 2022, he emerged into a world transformed, though he himself seemed unchanged. Less than 2 years later, in August 2024, he was back in court for violating his serious crime prevention order, using unregistered phones, making unauthorized travel, and holding more than £1,000 in cash. Despite the breaches, the court handed down a 14-month suspended sentence, allowing him to walk free once again. Now, as of July 17th, 2025, Curtis Warren lives under close surveillance, restricted by law, shadowed by suspicion, and still very much a man of interest. He insists he wants a quiet life away from the spotlight. But law enforcement isn't convinced. His empire is gone. His allies are scattered. But one question still echoes through police files and courtroom halls alike. After all this time, where is the money? Now, as of July 17th, 2025, Curtis Warren walks free, no longer the untouchable kingpin he once was, but far from forgotten. He lives under the shadow of court orders, tracked, restricted, and closely watched. He claims he wants peace, to vanish quietly into obscurity, to leave behind the empire that once brought him global infamy. But law enforcement doesn't buy it. His fortune, rumored to be stashed in offshore accounts, laundered through ghost businesses or buried deep underground, remains missing. Not a penny recovered, not a word spoken. To some, he's a retired man living out his days under the radar. To others, he's simply waiting. The silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And in the minds of detectives, prosecutors, and criminals alike, one truth lingers like a ticking clock. Curtis Warren might be out of the game, but the game isn't done with him. Not yet. Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video, but most importantly, please smash that subscribe.